What's up, everybody? It's Izzy, and we are back again with another Q&A today. So, let's get right into the first question, shall we? Why do PEDs make you feel bad? Do you experience lethargy or mental effects? It's really not a specific side effect, and I just couldn't explain this to the person that asked the question. But when you're on PEDs and you're on super physiological doses, you're stressing your entire system. It's not just like, oh, it's anxiety, oh, it's worry, oh, it's a darker mood, oh, it's lethargy. It's some of all of those things, but it's just a general increase in your physiological stress levels. Is it okay for my elbows to come off the pad at the top of preacher curls, or should I stop the range of motion just before the elbows come off the pad? This really doesn't matter. It's the same whole debate that everybody has about should your elbows come forward at the top of a curl. I really don't think it matters. You can use your own stimulus proxies to make the decision. Whatever gives you the best contraction and whatever gives you the best pump. The bicep is a very weak shoulder flexor, so it can potentially help there, but it mostly just stabilizes. I just don't think that this matters. It's sort of like one of these irrelevant pieces of minutia that people like to argue about to prove who knows the most about biomechanics, basically. And here we are with some calf raises, same way that I always do them. 5 count pause in the stretch, brief hold at the top to help eliminate momentum, slow controlled eccentric, and then usually after my work sets, I will go immediately into a DC style extreme stretch where I just hold a stretch. Do training vacuums really help with waist control? If we're talking about the context of stage physique presentation for bodybuilding shows, yes. Does it make your waist smaller in everyday life? No. Is it considered a stall the very first session you can't add 1% for the same reps minimum? Yes, it's still a stall. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to do anything about it just because you stalled one time. For example, if you had poor sleep, poor nutrition, maybe you, wore the wrong shoes, who knows? There's a million different things that could have come up that made it slightly different and made it so that you couldn't compare performances properly. So you may want to try it 2 or even 3 times if you think you can get it the next time. Do you use pre-workout with how hard you train? If I take it on leg days, I'm sweating everywhere / puking. So I truly believe that pre-workout is a net negative for most people, most of the time. When they do studies on this, people will act like caffeine has no effect on their sleep, but then when they actually measure it, a lot of people end up sleeping on average 30 minutes less, sometimes as much as an hour, and this is also dose dependent. So there are some people who caffeine doesn't really affect, fine, but the vast majority of people, it does negatively impact their sleep. And it also puts your heart rate at an elevated level for hours afterwards, depending on the dose. And overall, it's just not good for recovery. So I would limit your pre-workout use as much as you can. With incline presses, is the scapular retraction principle similar or the same as flat presses? Yes, it is. If you're trying to do incline presses that target your chest, arch your upper back and retract your scapulas. Now, in this video, I am using a standing single leg adductor machine, and the reason why I did that was because I wanted to test out my injured left side, get a better idea of what kind of strength gaps I was working with. And it turns out my left adductor is not really much weaker than my right adductor at all, which was confusing to me because I do have some pain high up on my left leg where the adductor inserts, but I'm starting to think maybe that's some sort of small groin pull or groin tear and not actually an adductor injury, because if it was an adductor injury, you would expect me to have different performance doing unilateral adductor work on my left leg versus my right leg, and that simply was not the case. My left leg was just about as strong as my right leg. I think I could probably get more reps with my right leg, but it was close enough for me to not worry. Do you train posing? How do you program structure that? Basically what you're going to do is you're going to hit all 9 mandatory poses, hold each pose for 30, 60 seconds even, and repeat that for 2 or 3 rounds and do it at least, once a day. For me, I admit that I'm sometimes lazy about this and I skip it in the off season because it's kind of shitty to pose when you're fat and you can't really see as much, and it's just not as gratifying of a thing. But this is something that I do on a regular basis. Yes. One thing you love and one thing you hate about North America. Hate is such a strong word, and North America is a very big place. I found this question just kind of impossible to answer. I guess I just am too much of a nerd sometimes. For example, one thing that I really hate about the U.S. is the politics. Everybody always gets on each other. People start hating their best friends, family members, etc., just for having different political views. It's like people cannot keep it respectful. But that's American politics, or United States politics. It's not Canada, I mean, I have no idea what Canadian political discourse is like. Maybe it's just as bad as here. But, you know, again, that's why I'm saying it's kind of like difficult to generalize. I would say it is a beautiful land, that's for sure, though. The geography is so varied and some of the most beautiful sights in the world here, but really difficult for me to like generalize anything in terms of culture across all of North America. I noticed the Roger squat has a top and bottom peg that have different strength curves. Would this make it a hinge prime equivalent? I mean, no, because prime equipment has 3 pegs that allow you to go for short, mid-range, and lengthened. But yes, the top peg of the Roger squat is lengthened biased. Similarly, the hammer strength ground-based lunge, the bottom peg is mid-range biased and the top peg is lengthened biased. I'm not going to go ahead and call that contraption a prime equivalent because prime equipment is just way nicer and way better overall, and it gives you the precise ability to adjust strength curves, whereas with these machines, particularly like the hammer ground-based lunge, it's just an accident, in my opinion, that the top peg is lengthened biased. They just imagine people doing shrugs and lunges on this, and I don't really think they ever thought it would be used for super heavy RDLs like the ones that I do on it. How did you like the stimulus to fatigue ratio of that unilateral adductor machine you showed? Honestly, it's just not as good as the seated one. Nothing is. I mean, the pluses of it was it didn't hurt my groin injury, so that means I can train adductors pretty fruitfully, and that's always good. And it was also very, very grindable. Like, I got like 10 grinders in a row, it seemed like, on one of the sets. So, very good strength curve as well. But yeah, the seated machine just can't be beat in the end. Do you find that the lactic acid buildup during calf training is worse than most other muscles? I think anything that's heavily short biased tends to burn a lot. Like if you get on the right chest fly machine that makes you get it fully short. Leg extensions are absolutely terrible. High rep calf stuff, I would say, yeah, that's pretty sucky. But, you know, personally, I have a pretty high pain tolerance for this sort of thing. So the burn just doesn't really bother me. And I would say the worst exercise for me is leg extensions. So one thing that I did discover in today's training is that I have some massive strength discrepancies going on between my right and left quad. And obviously the left side is where I've had the injured groin, injured hip, whatever it is. But this was really extreme. For example, I've done like 18 plates on the bilateral version of this exact same leg press. And I struggled to do 3 plates with my left leg for 7 reps. And then on my right leg, it felt like I had at least 10 more. So definitely some unilateral leg work in my future. Are you adding more volume now after JP's response to you? I'm going to play with adding a little bit of volume. I can't really do too much while dieting, though, and I'm not going to make wholesale changes to my training paradigm. So for me, I'm still going to use rate of progression to guide volume additions above all else. But on exercises where, you know, I've not really been adding reps anymore, I mean, I'm just kind of barely getting my 1% jumps, I'm going to play with adding some more volume to those exercises before they, quote-unquote, you know, stall and need it, just to see if it goes faster. Are neutral grip presses worse for hypertrophy? No, just flat out, no, they're not. If anything, a neutral orientation on the grip is less problematic for a lot of people's joints because it doesn't require you to have good internal rotation at the shoulder. And the overhand grip that you need for a Smith machine or barbell bench press, barbell incline, barbell overhead press does require the ability to internally rotate a good deal, and less so for incline and overhead, but definitely for flat. And neutral grip just doesn't. It's something that aligns a lot better for most people and just doesn't hurt their shoulders as much. So, I mean, I don't think there's any difference to the actual muscular stimulus, but it might be better from an SFR perspective because it hurts your joints less. So I moved on to single leg extensions after that and kind of confirmed the same pattern. So there's no adductor involvement really with leg extensions, and my left leg was still way weaker than my right leg. So my quads are weak, or at least they're different on each side. Do you find that boots help prevent feet slipping on calf raises better than other footwear? The reason why I always wear boots for calf raises is because those are simply the shoes that I go to the gym in. It was 12 degrees Fahrenheit in Boston this morning, which is where I live, and I think that's like 3 degrees Celsius. There was snow on the ground, so I wear winter boots. And then I just keep them on for calf raises because I like thick, flat soles. Thinner shoes tend to hurt my feet on heavy calf raises. And I don't really like the feeling of Olympic shoes for calf raises because it already puts your heel into extension, or your ankle into extension a little bit. But anyway, if you are having problems with slipping, the number one recommendation I can make for you is to do the leg press calf raise. It'll get rid of all your slipping problems, and it's an awesome calf exercise. Can you make decent gains with Bulgarian split squats as your primary leg exercise? Yes, flat out, obviously you can. But why? Like, honestly, I think everybody should be doing some form of bilateral squat. I don't think there's a better exercise for quads if you take it full range of motion. Whether it's a hack squat, a pendulum, or a back squat of some kind, high bar, safety bar, whatever, full range of motion, bilateral squats are stable and allow the heaviest loads that you can pretty much use for quad movements. I have as much respect for JP's takes on training as anybody, not least of which because he knows his stuff, but also because we use a very similar training style. So the things that he has to say are going to be more applicable to me than something that someone who uses an RIR style might have to say, for example. That said, I'm not going to wholesale update my opinions off of a 2-sentence exchange with JP. On the top here, this is from recently. This is late February. The bottom is late July of last year. So that's, I don't know, roughly 7 months. I'm up 16 pounds, and I look to be about the same body fat percentage. So I want to continue this diet, see how much lean tissue I actually added at the end of the day. And I am going to experiment with more volume. It's worth doing so, even just off of a comment from a guy like JP, because he is that knowledgeable on this subject. But I'm not going to go so far as to completely change my paradigms and perspectives until I've had time to try it myself and see if it does actually work better for me. You said you sleep more on a bulk. Is that just due to cutting stim use, or is bulking harder on your recovery? It's actually the opposite, man. Almost everybody that gets really lean, whether because they do contests or they just like to get really lean for their own gratification, male or female, you eventually start to sleep less. And it can get really, really bad when we're talking about contest levels of leanness to the point where people need like help falling asleep from pharmaceuticals. So why does that happen? It's hard to say, but it's probably just related to overall increases in physiological stress from dieting. Regarding protein-sparing modified fasts, when and how often would you recommend free meals? Well, first of all, I don't recommend protein-sparing modified fasts at all. You shouldn't run a protein-sparing modified fast unless you have to be a certain weight on a certain day, or you're getting ready for a wedding or a photo shoot or whatever, and you don't care about rebounding, because you will rebound and you will rebound hard. Your hunger signals will be just way too messed up. It's not the same as a normal diet where you can just switch easily into maintenance. You're going to be starving and you will almost always overeat. So for the average person, it's just a recipe to yo-yo diet. I do 0 free meals when doing a PSMF, and that's because I find that when most people do free meals, they turn them into an eating contest because they're so hungry. Even if you give them a time limit and you say, hey, you only have an hour to eat this meal, they'll just cram in as much food as possible. So personally, I only do planned refeeds. When I lost the 50 pounds in 1 month, as shown in this picture, I didn't do any free meals whatsoever because I knew I would be too hungry and just turn it into an eating contest. All right, everybody, that is it for today's Q&A. As always, if you like the video, like the video. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. Subscribe if you haven't already, and have a great day, friends. Bye.